previous talk as much as I did. Thanks for Martin for the great talk. I learned a lot. So I just want to give a lightning talk, so it's going to be very short, and I didn't make any presentations, so it's going to be, we're going to go over the code.
Can you zoom in a bit, maybe?
Yeah, okay, that's great.
Maybe zoom in at the browser.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. Is it good?
Yeah.
Yes.
So the lightning talk's about, actually there are two topics that I can talk about. The first one is about, like, I've been experimenting with certain interesting problems in Ember, and one of them is, I think, authentication. Like most of you guys probably come across this. Like I got into Ember approximately 5-6 months ago, and generally that's like one of the problems that people come across. Like, how do you do data authentication? And there are several libraries, like they're sort of standard, the Ember, the Simple Auth, and the Tori. And I've been like just experimenting after the knowledge I got after those few months. I want to do it without using any library, because those libraries also have features, and people always have a different strategy how to do authentication and stuff. And I've been rewriting one of my personal projects, so I want to do it in my own way, and I want to do it without a library to try it out. So this is my experiment, and so the way I did it was I did it without using any cookies. So the idea is to do the authentication via the HTTP header, authentication header, and you send a token within that header, and that token gets authenticated, and through that you send the data or not. And that way, actually, the advantages of that is, first of all, you don't need a cookie parser in your end session store in your backend, and also the data actually sends faster because you don't have cookie along with your request. And that's actually a more advanced, maybe, way to do that. Although I'm not a security expert, so it might not be the best. And already, I think, found one security vulnerability of this. This is not only this file, we're going to go over it. So now I'm just going to go line by line. And the first, I'm importing the config. I need that in order to, because we are making a custom request here that is /me to the API. And the reason we do it's kind of like standard, most web applications do that. So this is how we get the user data. And that's why we need the config in order to get the host, because in the production it's different. And then I use fetch. The reason I use the fetch library is because I also want to do this in Ember Fastboot. So I want the authentication library to work also for server-side rendering. So if you try to access a private page, you actually don't get anything. Like normally you wouldn't get anything, but I just want to make the library to work on any kind of environment. So the way the fetch is good is because instead of using the browser namespaces like a window or document, HTTP XML request, you just use the fetch library. This is like a standard. However, this library is not. It's just an advanced library for Ember data to use. Like React people use isomorphic fetch mostly. But this is for Ember Fastboot. If you guys don't know what Ember Fastboot is, it's just a wrapper on Ember to do server-side rendering. And I think it has a lot of potential, so you guys should check it out if you don't know. This is just doing ES6 destruction. So we're just getting so this service is just ember.service, ember.inject. I'm injecting the store, our Ember data store. And this service has two states. The first is authentication token and the current user. And we can access these services anywhere in our app. There's an initializer at the end. Yeah, here, for example. So we actually put that store to anywhere within the app. So you can use it in your template to say if current user, then you can show the HTML, otherwise display something else. And what it does is, okay, so this code is a bit verbose, but there's a reason behind it. If you go over the entire code, then you might understand exactly what I mean, why I did this promise-based function. First of all, this session in itself tries to not mutate the state as much. So there's like this promise that has either a then or a catch. So if there's something happens, it just rejects. So and the idea is to fetch current user. So if you can fetch it, then you do. If you can't, then it fails. So you couldn't authenticate. And the way it works is, so the authorization header is set here. So like if you make, when you make the request, it checks this authentication token. And the idea is that when you authenticate, you just set the authentication token, and when it's set, there is a authorization header with the request to the me. And if there is no, then there is no authentication. So I try to build upon this logic. And what happens is, like this is where I leverage the Ember data. So I also want the result to be an Ember data object, and we just push payload. This is not often used, but it's actually really useful. So what it does is that it is used internally in the serializers when an Ember data makes a request. So it gets the JSON data from that /me, and then pushes it to the users and a user model. So you have a user model, and all the data gets into a user model, and it's just a user instance in your Ember data, and then you peek on it. And Raven is just for. Okay, you can ask now. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So why is it an array? Users?
Yeah, it could be maybe not an array, just like this was working. So this is not the perfect code, but I try to make actually. It's probably,
there's no reason behind it.
Yeah, it could work, I guess, with the object as well. Yeah, it just uses JSON. Actually, it might not. Maybe there's probably a reason I did that, but yeah, I'm not sure now. Yeah. Okay. So the Raven is yeah, this is just a library to track errors, and if you have it, just like you can also set context on your current user when the user logged in, and then you resolve the promise here. We return the promise during the function. Yeah, this might be a bit advanced, so yeah, just go over it again. I think maybe in your free time if it's hard, or ask me a question anytime. So the login is where actually, so the session has actually functions, and you call the functions in your route actions. So you can actually reuse these route actions, and they are like the base route action. Here we can show, I think, route base. Yeah, so route base has the login and logout, and all the other routes actually inherit from this base route, and that way all your routes have these functions, and you just ask get this session login, and you pass the authentication token, and if the login succeeds, it's a promise, then you transition to the, so this is actually like server-side login. When somebody logs in, you just redirect them to a page, instead you transition. And if it doesn't happen, then nothing happens. So they are not logged in. Because the promise will only resolve if the authentication token is there, and this promise, when it resolves, then you get the login callbacks, like the login functions. So wait, where was I? Logout, and then there is logout. Logout, what it does is it just removes it from the local storage, and the login is stored in the local storage, so people can access it. Like it's so idea was that the session will be permanent, and if a person logs out, then you can log out. The advantage of using the authentication token in the HTTP header is that on the server you can change the authentication token, and after that the /me request will not be successful, so people logged out immediately. That way, like, you can really control people, like if somebody accesses some other people's accounts, one's account, and that way you can change the authentication token and they won't have an access anymore. And this is like the reason I use local storage is it could be multi-device. So this way you can be logged in multiple devices, and the devices will have their own authentication token in their local storage of their browser. And so that's I think a good way to control this. And yeah, when they log out, we just set the authentication token, the current user, all of them null. So there's an idea, like for example, I use undefined here, and then there's null. This is like a small detail. I prefer actually undefined, but like Ember, unfortunately, I think uses null. The reason why I like undefined is it's like, I can maybe show, like this is a very small thing, but like if you do type of unnull,
You can
get
zoom
an
in there as
object,
well.
right? You guys know this probably, but yeah. So if you do like, this will also return true, so that's sad. This is just a mistake in the language, unfortunately. But yeah,
Oh,
so
null is an object.
It's an object.
no. The mistake is that is true, but like null is also true. So like if you put it in the if, you know, like a null is also object. That's the, I just want to show like object could be typed differently. That's why I showed you. So, yeah. Okay.
That
So-
is undefined.
And then I put like this local storage window thing because of Ember fast boot, because in Node.js you don't have window. So if there is, you just like these, and that's, I did this application route because this way I guarantee that the /me is the first thing that gets requested in the Ember app. And after that, all that, because application route is the first route that Ember goes to, and after that it goes to the other models. And that way you can manage the synchronicity, like that way, like the whole, you can control. So this is like very important. Without that, your application will not work. Yeah, I think that's about it here. There's one more thing. Yeah, so this is also very cool stuff. Like maybe that's all the advantages of Ember. So all the Ember data requests go through one adapter. You can have also different apps, but application adapter, let's say. And here, you can have a computed property on the session authentication token, and if there is one, then you put this is actually the place where we put the authorization header on every Ember data request. Otherwise, so if there is no session authentication token, then it's just undefined. Because the first one that we saw was only for the /me, for the fetch, like our custom request, but this one is for every Ember data request. So every Ember data request will have their appropriate header depending on whether user is logged in or not.
You also have to define a serializer. You want to
For
store data, you want to send data.
for this, like you're gonna have your own serializer for the models that are gonna get serialized. This is just for the server to know whether the request is authenticated or not for any
Okay.
kind of request. Like it could be save of the model. Yeah.
So this works with the save as well.
Yeah, it works with
Cool.
anything, I think.
Cool.
Yeah, I didn't use much in production, but I think it works, yes. So that was the first I think talk. The second one is also an interesting experiment I think I did. Like if you guys, so first part is like it involves two parts. The first part is server side, so I'm not sure if this is very appropriate to this meetup, and it's a bit complex. But so basically, what it does is like, so I want to rewrite also since I'm rewriting the app in Ember, I want to also rewrite the search functionality. I had an application-wide search, and it was doing search across several tables and several columns. And before that, I was using Elasticsearch. This time, I want to use Postgres text search across multiple columns and tables. That way, I could get rid of Elasticsearch, have a more leaner setup. And I want to try out like whether it will be fast enough. It will be the results will be whether good or not. And I'm using Elixir here. Like I also want to rewrite the backend from Rails to Elixir. And what it does is like in Elixir you can really customize a query. So you can have a really nice query that does this complex query in a very maintainable way, and it's very fast as well. Basically, it just worked. You can check it out later on if you're interested in the backend part. So let's get into the front-end part and what is the problem here. Like if you have an application search, let's say on your top navigation, when you make a search, then you go to another link, and that link could be a front-end link. It could be an Ember link, let's say a link to area, or it could be an href, like a backend link that it's like an absolute link. So the idea is that if you're using Ember.js, why don't I just already get some data from the search endpoint to display the results. Why don't I make them Ember objects? So that way, when somebody clicks on one of the links, it will be actually a link to link. So like the page will appear instantly when somebody types down the search. I can actually demonstrate what I mean. First request takes time. Yeah. So we have it. So here we have a search field, and in this search field we can search anything and show, okay, the look is terrible, I know, just like I was just trying to get it down first. So what you see is like it makes already a search across several tables, and then you have them as Ember links. So when you click on one of these properties, like you immediately get into that page. Let's say like, so you immediately get to that page, and it's like a different link. It's in presentation mode, so it's not easy to see. The way it works on the back end is that every time you make a search, it just makes a new request. So like A, B. Yeah, so this is like, for example, the one, okay, I need to open it in okay, so this is like, for example, one data that's like security model, and this will get in push payload. So like, this will be loaded as a security Ember data model, and this will be also security. This one will be person. So it's a very custom structure, data structure, of course. In the back end, it's complex to do that. Implementation is hard, but the idea is simple. So you can just click on a link, and immediately the page appears. And also, where else you can leverage this technique is, I think, on input fields where you have, let's say, large data, and you want to associate. Let's say you have a form, and when somebody puts in types some letters on the input field, then there are search results appear, and when they click on one of the search results, then it could be an association on that model form, a form model. So a good example would be, for example, this app that I've been developing. Like here, there's, for example, one area. It's one of my favorite apps. There. Yeah, so here you have like a person can create an appointment, and there are like a lot of customers, and people can like put in, type in letters, and then they see like customers, and they can click on one of them, and immediately that person gets becomes like part of that model. It's just an association on the form model. So this is where you can leverage it, and the code for it was here. So I just like wrote this for the search, but I think the same idea could get applied to like, and it's not very well written, but it's okay enough, I think. So if like there's a search path, so you can do any kind of search. It could be a search on the model or an application-wide search. That's why there's this get search path, and it does a custom fetch here because it's an application-wide, so it's a very custom one. And yeah, so it adds them to an array, and like then push payloads to the Ember data object, and then peaks them from the ID. The peak record is used when you already have them in Ember data. You can just access them via peak record by giving the ID to the model. Yeah, that's why. So it was like a nice hack that I think this really shows like the power of Ember, like with other frameworks and stuff. This kind of stuff, this is like a very edge case that I think where Ember shines really well. So I just want to demonstrate that. Thanks for your time.